Hey, how's it going? This is Mr. Hernandez, and I am going to be talking about function notation a little bit. So make sure you open up your notebook, you put today's date, and title it function notation. Now, function notation basically comes from, let's say a table. So we've been looking at tables for a while, and so let's just, kind of start with what we already know. So let's pretend we have 2, 4, 8, 16. Okay, so the first thing that you need to know is, each of these represents a point, right? Like 2, 4, that's your x and that's your y. However, in function notation, what's different is that instead of y, we call it f of x. So we could say that that this is x comma f of x if we wanted to, where x is 2 and f of x equals 4. Okay, so you kind of have this kind of idea of going down the middle and saying, all right, all these values of x are 2, and, all these values of 4 are y, which is another word for f of x. Okay, so f of x equals 4. Now, what happens with function notation is you could basically take these two and put them together. So notice there's an x right here, and so that's where the x would go, which is in this case 2. So I could write f of 2 equals 4. And when I read this out loud, I'm saying f of, okay? F of 2 equals 4. Okay, so that's kind of what I'm saying when I'm reading this out loud. And all this is saying is that the x is 2. Notice, because that's where the x was over here, right? This x value by itself is 2, and then the y value is 4. So let me see. Here's 4. And so we could look at this and basically say, well, this is the point 2, 4. You know. And so if you were to be asked the question, like, here's an example. What is f of 4? You would just say, well, this is the x coordinate. So what is the y coordinate when x is 4? So you'd look on your table and say that's 16. So you'd say, f of 4 equals 16. So you're basically listing the order of the x and the y right there. Okay. What about f of 1? Well, you could look here and say, this is always, whatever's in the parentheses is where the x usually goes. And so f of 1 means x equals 1. And so here's x equals 1. So what is the y value? It's 2. And again, this represents the point 1 comma 2, which is over here. Okay. The last thing that you could be asked is something like f of x equals 16, and then they'll say, what is x? So remember, if whatever's in here is the x value, but notice that they didn't put anything here. They gave you this, which technically is the y value. So what point has a y value of 16? Well, it's this one here. And what is the x? It's 4. So we could kind of go backwards too and write it that way. Okay. And so, this is just a video tutorial, and, it's a good place to take notes. And so, the main thing I want you to know is that, and this is where the notes would come in, I want you to put an x and a y. Basically, where you see these coordinates, there's always x's and y's, okay? So here that's the y, and then you don't have the x, but then you found it down there. And so, anytime you have function notation, it's basically corresponding to a point, which is an x and a y. Okay, and so that's one set of notes. And then the next thing I want you to see, and this won't take long, it's on a graph. Okay, so let's just mark it 3 in each direction. You could pause this whenever you need to, but I'm just going to give you a couple points here. So this, I'm going to give you this point, which is 1 to the right, 2 up. So that's 1 comma 2. And I'm going to go 2 to the left and 1 down, which is negative 2, negative 1. So if you're doing function notation here, and you could be given like, something like this, f of 1 equals, and basically that's saying, here's the x. Now it wants to know what's the y, kind of filling in the blank, right? So where's the x value of 1? Well, it's going to be right here, and so the y value is 2. So you could put a 2 here, because that's the y value. And that's basically it. Okay, so it's basically like filling in the blank. You could also do, for this point over here, you could do f of negative 2 equals negative 1. And again, that's basically giving you the x and the y from this here, x and y. So yeah, I mean, the main thing is labeling x's and y's and knowing that in function notation, you still have the x and y as well, okay? And so that's it. Function notation on a graph, you could label that one, and function notation on a table, and you could label that one. So once you have both of these, go ahead and turn this in and attach your picture of your notes.